I'm the Reverend Simon Bell. Welcome to St. George-the-Martyr at the corner of John and Stephanie Street in downtown Toronto. The church was established in 1846 on land donated by the Boltons and the Darcy family, who were merchant families here in Toronto. It was really founded because of the expansion of Toronto, which is hard to imagine now considering it's downtown. But at the time, the cathedral was basically full. I mean, St. James Cathedral was way over full, and so they needed another Anglican church in the downtown core, at the time, we're on what was originally 5-acre lots that were allocated to merchant families, and so the Darcys basically donated a portion of that land to this church, and then almost paid for the thing to be built. So it originally existed as a massive big Gothic structure, which burned down in 1955. This building, which was a schoolhouse, and then the rectory, which is a massive 3-story brick house which is still standing. And it was part of the Darcys and the Boltons' legacy to Toronto, including a market and the first public baths in Toronto, which are just across the road from us. And so it was it was seen as a much needed thing as part of the expansion of Toronto. A lot of our churches that were built in the 18th and 19th century were built on neo-Gothic styles, so sort of neo-Gothic revivalism. So the church that originally stood where the garden is now was a massive neo-Gothic structure with a humongous bell tower with a spire on the top of it and everything. It wouldn't have been unrecognizable to somebody coming from England. So this church was one of the grand churches of Toronto in its day. Its spire and the spire of the cathedral were used for navigating ships on Lake Ontario because they were the most visible structures from Lake Ontario at the time because they were so tall. And so I think it had a significance to the community in its day. Because it was a wealthy merchant church as well, it funded academic life in Toronto. A lot of people were connected within the professional communities here. As a founder of Trinity College, for example, which is a very Anglo-Catholic theological institution, it had a strong music tradition to it, it had a strong liturgical tradition to it, all those things. So it was a place of some prestige in its day in terms of what it contributed to the life of Toronto as a city. In the winter of 1955, the entire structure was burnt to the ground. I mean, what was left was the remaining sort of stone structure was there, but it was declared unsafe, and so they demolished it. They literally removed it from sight. The only piece of the structure that's left now of that original church is the bottom portion of the tower. The spire was removed because it was a massive wooden spire, but the tower basically became like a chimney for the fire. So when you go into the tower, there are 4 floors inside it, and they're all wooden, and you can actually see where the burning was, because the flames basically flew up inside into the spire, and the spire was declared unsafe. And the main floor of the rectory is a massive big 8-bedroom house, and they opened up the main floor, and the congregation worshipped in there. So the bits of pieces that were saved from the fire were the font, the altar, the pews. These white pews were saved, and they were primarily the choir pews that were saved. And everything at that end of the church they were actually able to salvage to some extent. And some of the brass work, chalices, all those sorts of things were saved. And so for 30 years the church worshipped met in the rectory, and they converted it into a church. So the pews were actually bolted down in the rectory main floor, and while they tried to imagine what they would do next. And then in the mid-80s, they then decided to build what we presently have, which is a massive L-shaped hall and administrational complex that's 2 stories high with apartments in it and meeting rooms and offices and all those things. And then this building, which was actually the schoolhouse and then was used as a community theatre for decades, then became the church. I mean, we have 2 main windows that most people see. The main window, which is on the chancel end, is an Easter window, and it depicts the Easter story, and so you'll see butterflies in it. And there's also Eucharistic windows, so you'll see there's wheat inside it, there's wine glasses, but because it's a Trinitarian window, it represents Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as well within it. And then the other window, which was dedicated to a young lady who passed away in the congregation who was a musician, and so there's a musician's window which we have, and those are the 2 main pieces. Then there's a whole lot of stained glass which has been done in the doors and the portal, which have slowly been added to. In actual fact, a section of it was added this last year to that. And then there's actually a window outside, which most people don't recognize because it's hidden in the wall of the garden. And it's actually a window commemorating the Parkdale Horticultural Society, who've invested more than a decade of hard work into that garden and making it as beautiful as it is. And so there's a massive investment from the diocese in terms of finances. They've put about $750,000 into the church in the last 4 years. And that's really allocated towards staffing. And so what we're trying to do is reconfigure the worshipping community of this place. If you came here on a Sunday now, we have about 120 parishioners, and 50% of them would be under the age of 40. We're also part of the Grange. I mean, we're on the bottom end of the Grange Park, which is going to go through a massive refurbishment now. But it's really, because of our garden, we have this private little park that people use constantly, and it gets really busy in the summer. And so there's been a big investment in saying, well, this is one of the few places in the inner city where you can actually come and find peace and quiet and some sense of rest. And we run a farmers market here as well on a Wednesday, and the intention of that is to really provide people with another avenue of service to have access to healthy, good food, locally sourced organic food and those sorts of things. And the intention as well is we run a children's project as part of that. So we run an arts and craft project for kids, and we run a coffee shop as part of that conversation as well. So we're trying to gear ourselves up so that there's far more community engagement, not just in this building, but outside of this building as well, and our sense of presence within the broader community is there. The danger, I think, for many of churches is they become very insular and isolated, and we assume people come to us. People might find our architecture fascinating, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll come here as a regular member of this community. So I think we're trying to work more on this sense of there's a community out there that has needs, and how do we engage ourselves in those needs.